Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel tonight. What you are about to hear is not speculation, not rumor, and not exaggeration. It is an unfolding reality that has sent shockwaves through the Kremlin and pushed Vladimir Putin closer to his worst strategic nightmare. Crimea, the crown jewel of Russia's 2014 annexation, is now facing what experts are calling a zero-day water crisis. More than 5 million people are staring at empty taps. Evacuation plans are being whispered, then openly discussed. And for the first time in years, Moscow is being forced to confront a terrifying question. What happens when Crimea becomes impossible to hold? To understand how dangerous this moment truly is, we need to step back and look at why Crimea matters so much to Putin. Crimea is not just territory, it is symbolism, it is pride. It is the place Putin used to prove to his people that Russia was rising again after the humiliation of the Soviet collapse. Losing Crimea, or even appearing weak there, would shatter the narrative he has built for over a decade. And now, the very survival of Crimea is under threat, not from tanks or missiles, but from something far more devastating in the long run: water. Crimea has always been dry. Long before modern politics, the peninsula depended on water flowing from mainland Ukraine through the North Crimean Canal. This canal supplied up to 85% of Crimea's fresh water. When Russia annexed Crimea in 2014, Ukraine shut the canal. At first, Moscow claimed it was no problem. Russian state media proudly announced new wells, reservoirs, and innovative solutions. But behind the propaganda, the reality was brutal. Agriculture collapsed, reservoir levels dropped year after year, salinity increased, wells were overused, poisoning groundwater with salt. When Russia launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022, one of the first military objectives was the canal. Russian forces reopened it, restoring water flow and temporarily easing the crisis. For the Kremlin, this was presented as proof that Crimea was secure forever. But that sense of security was an illusion, because water infrastructure is fragile, and Ukraine understood that better than anyone. Over the past months, a series of precise Ukrainian strikes have targeted key infrastructure linked to Crimea's water supply. Dams, pumping stations, power lines feeding water facilities, and logistics hubs have all come under pressure. At the same time, climate factors have worsened the situation. This year brought lower than average rainfall. Reservoirs that once looked stable are now shrinking rapidly. Satellite images reveal water lines dropping week by week, exposing cracked earth where water once stood. Now we arrive at the phrase that has terrified Russian officials: zero day. Zero day does not mean inconvenience. It means the moment when the system collapses, when taps stop, when reserves are gone, when there is no backup left. According to multiple reports from inside Crimea, some regions are already receiving water for only a few hours a day. In others, water trucks have become the main source of supply. Hospitals are being prioritized. Military bases are being quietly placed ahead of civilians. And that is where panic begins. Because once civilians realize that soldiers are getting water while families are not, the social contract breaks. People stop believing official statements. They stop trusting local authorities. Protests begin, even in places where protests are dangerous. Crimea has already seen small demonstrations quickly suppressed, but the fear is spreading faster than the police can silence it. Imagine being a family in Sevastopol, Simferopol, or Kerch. You wake up, turn the tap, and nothing comes out. You wait, still nothing. You hear rumors that the water trucks won't arrive today because fuel has been redirected to the military. You hear that schools might close. You hear that hospitals are running low, and then you hear something even worse. Evacuation is being discussed. Evacuation is the word Putin never wanted associated with Crimea. Evacuation means failure. It means admission that Russia cannot protect or sustain the territory it claimed as its own. And yet, contingency plans are reportedly being drawn up, not announced publicly, of course, but regional administrators have been instructed to prepare lists, transportation routes, and temporary housing options in mainland Russia. This is where the number becomes critical. 5 million people. That is the estimated population of Crimea. Evacuating even a fraction of that number would be a logistical nightmare. Roads are limited. The Kerch Bridge, already damaged multiple times, is a choke point. Ferry capacity is insufficient. Rail links are vulnerable. And all of this would happen under the watchful eye of Ukrainian intelligence and long-range strike capabilities. For Ukraine, this crisis represents a powerful form of pressure that does not require a massive ground assault. Water scarcity undermines morale, strains military operations, and forces Russia to divert enormous resources just to keep Crimea functional. Every liter of water delivered by truck is fuel burned, money spent, and manpower tied down. Every day the crisis continues, the cost of holding Crimea rises. Inside the Kremlin, this has triggered deep anxiety. Crimea is supposed to be untouchable. It is supposed to be Russian forever. But water does not care about propaganda. Pipes do not respond to speeches. Reservoirs do not refill because of patriotic slogans, and this is where Putin's fear becomes visible. Putin's power rests on the image of control. He must appear decisive, strong, and victorious. Crimea was his greatest trophy. Losing it, or being forced into a humiliating evacuation, would crack the foundation of his authority. Russian elites understand this. So do ordinary Russians. That is why state media is downplaying the crisis, blaming temporary technical issues, and accusing Ukraine of water terrorism. But fear is leaking through the cracks. Russian military bloggers, often more honest than official outlets, have begun to warn openly about the situation. They talk about overstretched logistics, about water being prioritized for bases and ammunition depots, about civilians becoming a problem. Some even question whether Crimea can be held long-term under these conditions. For the people of Crimea, the situation is even more terrifying. Many supported Russia in 2014 because they believed life would improve. Instead, they have faced sanctions, isolation, economic decline, and now the most basic necessity of life is disappearing. Those who opposed annexation feel vindicated but also trapped. Those who supported it feel betrayed. Let's talk about the military implications because they are enormous. Modern armies require water in massive quantities. Soldiers need it to drink, cook, clean, and maintain equipment. Vehicles need water for cooling systems. Medical facilities need sterile conditions. If water becomes scarce, operational readiness collapses. Bases become vulnerable, morale plummets, disease spreads. Ukraine understands this perfectly. Water is not just a humanitarian issue, it is a strategic weapon. By targeting infrastructure and supply routes, Ukraine forces Russia to choose, protect civilians or sustain the military. And in war, regimes often choose the military, which only deepens civilian anger. Now consider the timing. This crisis is unfolding as Russia is already stretched thin on multiple fronts. Resources are being drained by ongoing fighting. Sanctions continue to bite. The economy is under pressure. Fuel, manpower, and equipment are all limited. Adding a massive humanitarian and logistical crisis in Crimea is something Moscow can barely afford. Internationally, the optics are disastrous for Russia. Images of water trucks, empty reservoirs, and desperate civilians undermine the claim that Crimea is a successful annexation. They remind the world that occupation comes with consequences. For Ukraine, this strengthens its argument that Crimea is not safe under Russian control and must be returned. There is also the psychological dimension. For years, Crimea was portrayed as untouchable. Ukrainian strikes elsewhere were shocking, but Crimea was supposed to be different. Now that illusion is gone. Every crisis, every shortage, every evacuation rumor chips away at the sense of permanence. Let us imagine the worst-case scenario from Moscow's perspective. Reservoirs hit critically low levels. Water delivery systems fail. Protests spread despite repression. Ukraine continues precision strikes. The Kerch Bridge becomes unreliable. Evacuation begins quietly, then visibly. Videos appear online. Panic spreads. The word retreat enters the conversation. At that point, Putin faces an impossible choice. Escalate dramatically to try to secure Crimea at all costs, risking wider war and further isolation, or accept a slow, humiliating loss that exposes the limits of his power. Neither option is appealing. Both threaten his legacy. For Ukraine, patience is key. The water crisis does not require dramatic announcements. It works silently, day by day. It forces Russia to bleed resources without a single tank crossing a border. It turns time into a weapon. For the people watching around the world, this moment is a reminder that modern warfare is not only about explosions. It is about infrastructure, supply chains, and sustainability. Control of water, energy, and logistics can decide the fate of entire regions. As we speak, families in Crimea are storing water in bathtubs and bottles. Hospitals are rationing. Farmers have already lost seasons of crops. Tourism, once a pillar of Crimea's economy, is collapsing. Who wants to vacation where water is uncertain and war feels close? And the fear is spreading beyond Crimea. Other occupied regions are watching closely. If Crimea, the most symbolically important territory, can be pushed to the brink, what does that mean for places with less political value to Moscow? This is why this moment matters so much. It is not just about water. It is about control, legitimacy, and the future of the war. It is about whether occupation can survive under sustained pressure. And it is about whether Putin's carefully constructed image can withstand reality. As the situation develops, one thing is clear: Crimea is no longer secure. The Zero DY warning is not a headline designed to shock. It is a countdown to a decision Moscow hoped it would never have to make. So, as you follow the news in the coming days and weeks, pay attention not just to battles and speeches, but to reservoirs, pipelines, and water trucks. Because sometimes the most powerful force in war is not fire, but thirst. If you found this analysis important, make sure to stay connected, because this crisis is far from over. What happens next in Crimea could reshape the entire conflict and mark the beginning of the end of one of Putin's most prized conquests. Thank you for watching, and we will see you again in the next update.